I am Corinne and I will be interviewing you today. My first question is, what is your baptismal name?
It's my actual name, Marla. That would be the name my parents gave me, and that is a matter of record. Also, I wasn't born and raised Catholic, and it's on the record as my baptismal name. It's a derivative of the name Mary, and Mary was my confirmation name.
Okay. So that is also your religious name and what you go by now?
Correct.
Okay. And so if your family was not Catholic, what was your household like growing up?
I'm the youngest of 4 children. I have 3 older brothers, and my mom's side of the family, they were mostly Lutheran, German, and on my dad's side of the family, they were also German and mostly First United Church of Christ. And when my parents got married, we were raised First United Church of Christ up until, I want to say I was in high school, because in the Protestant world, it's more about who the minister is. And they had a minister change at the church where I was growing up, and my parents really didn't like that minister, so they went shopping for another church, and I just kind of dropped out at that point.
Okay. Okay, and what kind of relationship did you have with your parents?
I mean, basically it's a good relationship, German family, not necessarily physically affectionate or anything. I was the youngest, and I'm from a huge sports family. I have 2 of my 3 brothers are basketball coaches at a Division II university, and they played in college, and then they coached, and I grew up in the ballpark and in the gymnasium, whether I liked it or not. So I sort of have this love-hate relationship with sports. Sports was the religion in my family.
How long have you been a sister?
You take your entrance or your time as a sister from the time you enter novitiate, which was 2001, so 13 years.
Can you briefly describe the types of ministries you've been involved in?
Mostly just parish ministry. That's what I do now. That's what I did. I was also working in a parish in Cincinnati before I came here to Minster, where I live, and I work in a parish, and I work part-time for the diocese. So before that, I was in the business world. Worked in the computer business and retail business.
Okay. And when did you first consider a religious vocation for yourself?
Really not until after I became Catholic 20 years ago, and was not even thinking about it. I had a friend who was Catholic, a guy friend, and I knew at that point in my life that I wanted to be back into what we would call organized religion. I had already, through faith, had developed my personal relationship with Jesus. But I knew that I wanted to be in a faith community, that it wasn't something you could just practice by yourself, and that part of being a Christian is being in a faith community. And my friend was Catholic, so he brought me to St. Patrick's in Troy and set that up, and that's where I inquired, and they put me in a small faith community to share around the scripture readings, the gospel readings, and then from there I entered the RCIA, which is our process for becoming Catholic.
And so what exactly attracted you to religious life?
Well, it's really a God thing, because I didn't have any concept about what religious life was. It was, my only concept was the TV show, The Flying Nun. But what happened in the process, if you know how RCIA functions, and it was a good process, it really immerses you into the life of Christ and a relationship with Jesus, and also a relationship with the Christian community. And it was just after that my father passed on, and also the relationship that I was in, I was becoming too churchy for him. And a part of me was just feeling like God was speaking to me through scripture readings and through other people. It was the Holy Spirit that was drawing me in. It had to be a God thing because I had no concept. I was not introduced to religious life when I was young. But it was something that felt like home and felt like more like me. That it was not a relationship with one other person or a couple relationship, because I always had some things about those relationships that I liked my alone time too. So it just seemed like it was something that God was calling me to pursue, and I couldn't not pursue it, because if I would just ignore it, it wouldn't go away.
Did you look at many communities before choosing one?
I didn't really know. Some people then, like the parish priest, pastoral associate who was on staff, they give you resources, and there's this book in the Archdiocese where it explains more about what religious life is, and you can send away for material. And so this was like you fill out a postcard. And this was before computers are like how they are now too. This is like 20 years ago. So I sent away, and I got a whole bunch of information from all different religious congregations. And you could check whether or not you wanted a contemplative community, an apostolic community, or what was called then an active contemplative community. And so I checked the active contemplative community, and I got all this stuff in the mail. And it was like, well, how do I choose a place far away from here that I know nothing about? And at that time too, I was also seeing a spiritual director. And because of these experiences of God, it was recommended that you go and you see a spiritual director. And this is somebody that's trained to help you to figure out how you navigate something like this in a way that is healthy, and you're not thinking that these experiences that you're having, what do I want to say, supernatural experiences of a chosen nature that would, make you very egotistic. You go and you see somebody that helps you to discern and put it into a more realistic context. So at that time I was seeing a spiritual director who was a sister of the Precious Blood. And so I started to think, well, and also I was getting highly involved in the parish on a volunteer level, and was involved in many things. And I was thinking, I love this too much to just leave it, that I think I'm really called to stay here for a while and to keep figuring this out. And the Sisters of the Precious Blood were in Dayton, and I lived in Troy. So that was like less than 30 minutes away. So a person said, look at their spirituality and their charism, the gift that they are to the church, and their mission statement. And if you resonate with those things, then that is an indicator that might be a place to check out. So I did. And that's where I'm at.
Was it difficult for you to just drop your work and everything you were involved in at the time to dedicate your life to this?
Yes and no. I had switched over from a retail job where it was a lot of evenings and weekends, a lot of hours, to working in a computer retail environment where it was more regular hours. And actually I like that. And then that gave me the time to pursue things in the parish. And then when you enter a community is when you have to let go of that job and sell your car and get rid of any belongings that you have that, I mean, you can bring some few personal belongings like your clothes and things like that, but I didn't bring any furniture or anything like that. So it really wasn't that hard for me because it was something that I was in my 30s when I did this, and so it was something that I was ready for, and getting rid of things and then entering. And when you enter the community at that point, like I'd lived in community before that for a year, and then you enter the community. So it happened in stages. It doesn't just happen all at once. And you go through the stages to check out if you still think this is something you want to do. So you're discerning it all along. And by the time I actually got rid of 95% of everything I had, and I didn't like own a home, or the only thing I was paying on was a car. And I rented an apartment. So, for some people, if they own certain things, it's a little bit more complicated. So, I think I was ready. And when you enter the novitiate, it's a different kind of time. It was weird not working. I'd worked all my life, and I'd worked full time all my life. But on the other hand, you're involved in a lot more of your spiritual growth and learning the community and visiting different places and having a lot of new and different experiences that I embraced that.
What have you been able to do as a professed sister that you wouldn't have been able to do as a lay woman?
Well, that's a complicated question, or a deep question, because ministerially there's nothing that I do as a sister that a lay woman can't do. So like working in a parish, if I was in social ministry or the social mission of the church and social work or anything like that, prison ministry, you don't have to be a sister to do that. But the thing about being a sister is, and you can also be a consecrated celibate person in the world, but there is something about that when you are of a public nature as a sister of the Precious Blood, that you are, you can't be anything other than that. I can't carry that charism and that spirituality unless I was a sister of the Precious Blood. And you can't, that identity, and that identity, when I say that's public, it's like whenever I am someplace, I am representing my congregation, and all the members of my congregation are there. So that's the unique thing. When I go and talk about the retirement fund for religious, I'm speaking for all religious there, but I'm also speaking for my community as a sister of the Precious Blood. And so it's more of an intangible thing. It's more of a God thing, and it's more of an identity thing, about more about who I am. And it's taking our spirituality. Our spirituality is that life-giving, reconciling presence of Jesus in the world as a sister of the Precious Blood. I can do that as a baptized person, okay, but there's something about as a sister of the Precious Blood that reflects our charism and spirituality. And the only way you can get to know that is when you get to know members of the community.
What has your educational journey been like?
When I was living in Marion, I just left high school and went to Ohio State University, not knowing what I really wanted to do, maybe major in journalism, but I wasn't sure. I ended up majoring in sociology with a concentration in criminology, and after that I didn't know. I was the typical kid. I didn't have a whole lot of support in trying to figure some of that out. My brothers all went to college on scholarship. I didn't play sports. a sort of a black sheep in the family in a certain way. And I went to so large of a school that it was more about having fun than it was to seriously consider what I wanted to do. I had a lot of growing up to do. But I went to school. I graduated and I started working in the retail business because that's where I was working part-time anyway, and moved myself up through the management ranks, and that's how I found myself in the parish life. And then going on, I deferred getting my master's in order to enter the religious community, and then I worked on my master's. I wanted to do my master's. After I entered parish life at RCIA, I wanted to do my master's degree. But it was this whole conversation with going to the come and see kinds of experiences with religious life and talking to people in our community that they were supportive of me getting a master's degree. And it was that feeling of, I've really felt called to a deeper level of community than what was in the parish life. And I was discerning whether or not religious community was that. There are intentional community kinds of experiences that you can have outside of religious life. But I was thinking religious life was what I was feeling called to. So I deferred my master's degree until my second year novitiate, and I started taking courses for a master's degree in theology.
Events, individuals, or achievements come to your mind?
The sisters, basically because of the United States, being a relatively young country compared to a lot of countries like in Europe, they came here, they left their homes, they never would see their families again. They came here and they were part of the pioneer community of the people that moved here from Europe, that did a lot of hard work to clear the land, to grow food, and they also became the teachers, the backbone of the Catholic school system. Would not, the schools would not have been possible without the religious. So what they did in that sense, and also like the hospital systems that we have, like Good Sam and Mercy, that was all what sisters did. And so the history of the Catholic Church in the United States, at least a third of it is just the history of the women religious, and the men religious too. I don't want to say, because there are brothers too. But that is what the sisters did. And it was a different time in history, and ever since the Second Vatican Council, we've affirmed that everybody has a baptismal call. So what the sisters did, what ministries there were in the church that people just thought of, that's what you did when you were a sister, to be a teacher or a nurse, or in some cases, like Catholic charities and social work. Anybody can do those now. Okay, so what sisters do is they go wherever they're at, in their own backyard, is they find the gaps, and they're missionaries. And yes, I can be a missionary even here in Minster, Ohio. So it's wherever you're at, and it's a certain kind of mindset and a certain kind of all in your whole self into that the sisters brought and continue to bring to whatever it is they do.
Is there a pope that has a special place in your heart?
Well, right now it would have to be Pope Francis. I think he's the Holy Spirit. I think it's a God thing why he's our Pope. He is a religious, and some of the things that he's already said about religious life are like, he's right on the same page. We're no longer what I would say the labor force of the church. The sisters didn't get paid for what they did in the past. And now and it's not like it's about the money, but religious life orders are self-supporting. We don't get money from the church or the institutional church. So a lot of sisters, their salary and their income goes to support the other sisters in the community. And so Pope Francis has really advocated that it's a life form in the church. We've always had religious life, and it's always been a radical following of the gospel. A lot of times the institutional church doesn't always know what to do with us, because we're essentially trying to follow the way of life of Jesus. He was kind of itinerant. He moved a lot. He went around. He went helping people, and he wasn't afraid to challenge people. And he was always calling people to become their better self. I see religious life as that radical following of Jesus. And Pope Francis, I think, understands that. But also because I work in parish life, he is advocating it's about how we approach the other person. It's about those relationships and community. And so we enter into a relationship with people first in order to help them. He refers to the church as a field hospital. So it's not starting from what we would call a deductive approach to saying, here's what the church says or here's what the church teaches, and asking people to comply with that. It's meeting people where they're at on the journey and doing what we call accompaniment or journey, and walking with them and helping them and being Christ with them and helping them to understand a relationship with Jesus.
Could you take me through your ministries and positions?
When I started in parish life, I was volunteer, and that would be in Troy. Let's see, I worked on the RCIA team after I was a participant, which means that you walk with the other people that are becoming Catholic, and you're a part of that process and that journey, and you might be a catechist or a teacher. So I did that. I led communion services and did everything like a volunteer. We had a soup kitchen. I worked in the soup kitchen. I was part of a small Christian community. So that gave me the taste for parish life. And so then when I went to a parish called Our Lady of the Visitation in Cincinnati, and it's a large suburban parish, it's a good place to get staff experience as a staff person. And I was a pastoral associate there. And as a pastoral associate, I oversaw adult faith formation and did some pastoral care and outreach. So I was coordinator of about, 12 to 14 different kinds of ministries, but I didn't actually do those ministries. Since it was a large suburban parish, we had what we call volunteer coordinators. So with volunteer coordinators, like they might be coordinating an Elizabeth ministry, and I helped them with that. Okay, so I coordinated things like RCIA, and I was highly involved with Christ Renews His Parish and the infant baptism program. Did a lot of work with some of the governance of the parish. Helped get some ministries off the ground where they did an outreach to nursing homes in the area. Helped with Elizabeth ministry. I was like when you're a pastoral associate in a parish, you're kind of like the Jill of all trades. I worked a lot with liturgy too. I had a pastor who was strong into liturgy. I was on the worship commission, and then when he left, then I picked up and oversaw some of those ministries. Like it was my responsibility that people were trained for lectoring and Eucharistic minister and some of those roles in the parish. And now here at St. Augustine, it's a smaller parish, so it's a different parish environment, and I'm doing a lot more of the hands-on kinds of ministry that I had people in a larger suburban parish doing. I'm doing as well. And it's kind of refreshing in a certain sense because it's less administrative and it's more hands-on, one-on-one. And here I also do some of the same broad strokes: adult faith formation, Bible study, programs, speakers. We're getting an adult faith team together and talking about the needs of our parish. And I also coordinate the bereavement committee and some of the ministries that we do with the visitation and the Mass and the Mass of Remembrance. But more here than anywhere have I gotten involved in like grief ministry, grief share, and the aftercare kind of process when the family has lost a loved one. So those are the broad strokes. I've also done some of the religious education. For an interim year, I was coordinator of the high school parish school of religion. I still work with the adults in that process, the catechists, and also with the regional diocesan office who ministers to staff people like me. I work part-time out of that office, more as a consultant on resources, and I do some presentations, and I teach some certification classes.
What do you see as the role of women religious in the 21st century?
To be that a beacon of light and a beacon of hope for people, to be that presence of compassion and dialogue, and to be walking with people in their journey and in their disappointments. Pope Francis calls it, you have to he's calling people to be with the sheep and take on the smell of the sheep. And what that means is be there in the joys and struggles with people and having had that yourself. And because it's a public profession, it's you're representing God and you're representing your community in that. So it's pointing toward Jesus and toward God beyond yourself and getting yourself out of the way when you do that.
Would you recommend religious life today?
I would. I think it's kind of it's an exciting time and a challenging time for religious life. I think it's not so institutional anymore, and it's going to be much more small community and much more postmodern and much more using all those things, social media, to accomplish your mission. And the mission, as religious, there's always going to be religious life in the church, and there's always going to be the mission of religious life in the church. But what that's going to look like is going to be different than the large institution of people that come out and do one thing, like teach or be nurses, and then go home at night, nobody sees them. That's gone. So it's a time where people have to kind of, I don't want to say define it, because the essentials are always defined: community, prayer, and ministry. And that's all those three things make up your mission. But you have to define that from now, for the signs of the times now. And there's still a lot of creativity that can go into that, and a lot of vision that can go into that. That's what makes it exciting right now. But it's challenging because it's going to call forth those things from people to do that.
How do you see young adults changing the world?
Social media. What young adults can do, they don't need my help, they don't need older people's help. They can do it already, and they can use that social media for good to do it.
What kind of ideas do you see them using social media for?
Well, there's a lot of They can launch nonprofit organizations. They can bring awareness to certain things. And I think millennials are more concrete about the practicality. They're going to put their energy into something to them that looks like they're making a small difference. You know, they're not out to change institutions necessarily. I mean, you tell me, because I think you're a millennial, but you know, it's not. But I don't think millennials have a bad idea about institutions. They're not anti-institutional or whatever. But I just think, you know, millennial people will go and stand out on the street corner and hand out sandwiches, you know, because that's what makes the most practical sense. And they'll have that sense of presence right there. But they also have that sense of coming into realizing maybe that there are some system issues that they can address, and they know how to use social media to do that, like Bread for the World, or I think that's what it's called. There's an organization where I was just reading a letter of a millennial person that started as an intern and is now using their computer skills to help expand that particular organization, and that's a worldwide organization. You know, so I don't know. They have the greatest command over the communication on a global level. Then, you know, they can make movies and documentaries that highlight a problem and things like that.